This is Moving Beyond One Dimension, diversifying the Latinx immigrant narrative in the Hollywood film and media industry. Before presenting my topic, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Katherine Sincuir Alvarez, but mostly everybody calls me Kat. I am a first generation Guatemalan Latina daughter of immigrants from Miami, Florida. Miami is known for its multicultural community, filled with people from all over Latin America and including the Caribbean. Mostly, everybody spoke Spanish. And of course, in my family, speaking Spanish at home was also a very important thing. It was so important, even, that we watched films in Spanish dubbed as well. Because of this, I thought people like Drew Barrymore or Meryl Streep were probably of Latin American descent, perhaps of Colombian or Argentinian heritage. Not only because I watched these films with Spanish translation, but because I knew my Latinx community in Miami, Florida, and I knew that they were diverse in physical traits. It was not until I was about 20 years old that I began to study films at the university level, where the films would not be dubbed in Spanish, that I connected two and two together. That here, the representation of Latinx people in the United States Hollywood industry is very minimal. In fact, here are a few statistics that reflect this lack of representation. Between 2007 through 2019, in my childhood, in fact, here is a picture of myself when I was about 8 years old, the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative recollected and analyzed 1,300 films to find that only 5% of these movie characters were Hispanic Latinos. And only 2.2% of lead or co lead roles went to Latinx actors as a whole. Additionally, they found that the overall percentage of Hispanic Latino directors is of 4.2%, leaving white male directors to Latinx directors in a ratio of 50 to 1. So, what does this mean for representation? As the data shows, the lack of representation is already concerning. But this begs the question: how is a Latinx character being represented in the Hollywood industry? And moreover, how is the Latinx immigrant character being represented? To answer this question, I analyzed Hollywood's formula for success and connected these ideals to the stereotypes that I found and reinforced in films. Then I conducted local research to observe whether these stereotypes reflect the Latinx immigrant narrative or not. And it was from this information that inspired the creation of a possible series that which their goal would be to reject the stereotypes and instead offer a different perspective. To begin, to understand the Hollywood's film and media industry standards, we must first visualize it under a business enterprise lens. The Hollywood film and media industry follows an industrial formula that projects profit success in the box office. This formula relies on an audience's familiarity on a subject and exploits this throughout character tropes, recyclable plot devices, and predictable genres. Some example of these may be the hero's journey, the enemies to lovers trope, or even the sidekick whose only purpose is to make the audience laugh. Profit success is the first and foremost goal to consider when analyzing the Hollywood's industry's motive and goals. Um, Visualize it as an enterprise who creates a product and wants to make sure they get the most profit. More specifically, after analyzing Hollywood's stereotypes against Latinx immigrants, I found two unfortunate patterns. The first is to purposefully other the Latinx immigrant from the American character, if I may marginalize, and the next is to promote American ideals, values, and benevolence. So let's see how these two patterns come up as we explore the stereotypes. First and foremost, like any other character trope, the Hollywood industry must codify the Latinx immigrant character under a few certain factors. Obviously, the character must be coded as a foreign person of Latinx descent through their nationality, which oftentimes remains ambiguous or is of Mexican, Colombian, or Puerto Rican descent, having there been over 10 countries that can be explored. Additionally, their accent is important, not to show their ability to be bilingual, learning two languages, rather to exploit the idea of the character's ignorance and humorize their vocabulary. A prime example of this is James L. Brooks' 2004 film Spanglish. Additionally, the Latinx immigrant character may fall under the film or series comedic relief. This can be through the way that they talk, they present themselves, their loudness, or even their scripted jokes. Gloria Delgado Pritchett from the ABC Modern Family comedy series is a good example of this. Or even Luis's character in the Marvel Universe in Ant-Man, when circumstances become tough for Scott Lang, the main character of the film. Lastly, the Hollywood industry exploits and reinforces the Latinx immigrant stereotype in labor and struggle by purposely having the characters fall into positions of hard labor, like agriculture, domestic work, or even in some case, criminalization. It is important to note that before, during, and throughout the plot of the film, the Latinx immigrant character struggles and finds tranquility only when meeting a considerate American that grants them their happily ever after. As seen in these stereotypes, profit is ensured by working on audiences' familiarity, recycling the tropes, and promoting American values through the good American character in the film. It is also important to note that in all of these films, the Latinx immigrant woman is hypersexualized for the audience's visual pleasure, but for the sake of the study's time and the greatness of this topic, I cannot go in depth, as this would be an entirely different thesis in and of itself. Furthermore, after these Latinx immigrant characters have been coded to be presented in such a way this serves as the foundation, they also lack a complex narrative, and this is what completes the one dimensionality of the character. One key element that is stripped away from the Latinx immigrant character is their reason for migrating. The reason is oftentimes ambiguous and vague. Arguably, the reason for migration should at least be stated in the film to provide some depth to the character. Additionally, the limited perspective offers a single way of immigrating to the United States through a treacherous journey by crossing the border by foot and through the desert. While this may be the narrative for some, it is not the story for all immigrants. And for films like Spanglish, crossing the border is shown as a humorous scene, which flattens the life threatening voyage for those who have gone through this real life experience. When an immigration narrative, however, is explored, the character who is celebrated reaches financial security and they're happily ever after, they are usually the immigrant's child. This can happen in two forms. The first is through a white savior complex, as is seen in films like Freedom Riders or Mike Farland USA, in which an American character will take it upon themselves to save and provide opportunities for the immigrant child, as opposed to their immigrant child's family. It is important to note that in this case, the issue is not that an American is helping a minority group, rather, the child's immigrant family is not the vain advocate for the child's. The other way could be through this colonized rooted idea that the immigrant child is either being born or raised in the United States and therefore makes them more worthy of having dreams and aspirations because they are becoming American, while the immigrant themselves has been othered and does not have that agency as we've seen before. This ideology stems as far as the early periods of colonialism in the United States, where indigenous children would be forced into boarding schools and forced to be civilized, and in this case, by extension, are Americanized. So, then, how does local ethnographic data relate to these stereotypes? Throughout observations of personal and professional settings and oral history interviews, I had the pleasure of recollecting the experiences of three women from three different countries of Latin America and each with a different profession. While I may not be able to share all of my findings, here are a few highlights that directly correspond to what has been shared among the stereotypical narrative of Hollywood. In the case of these three women, all of them traveled to the United States by plane. They did not encounter a treacherous journey. Moreover, after asking them the reason why they immigrated to the United States, each of them confessed to me that moving to the United States was not a part of their plan. As any person who loves their country, they were hesitant to leave their home behind. Additionally, none of them truly viewed the United States as the height of safety and prosperity, contrary to common opinion here in the United States. Once arriving to the United States, each of these women had a different experience when adapting to this new culture. While some experiences were similar, this portion of data serves as a reminder that these are people who's experience the human condition in diverse and unique ways. It would be unjust to wrap all of these experiences of identity together to fit a specific mold as is seen in the Hollywood industry. Also important to note is their involvement with the community again. Each is involved in their own unique way, but their service does not go unnoticed. Natalia Molina, a Latinx American historian, would call all of these women placemakers, citizens that take up space and create a social network. These are citizens who have created urban anchors, centers that are semi public spaces where the community may congregate and celebrate belonging. The beauty of this study is that it shows that among these three figures, we can find a different narrative behind each one, which opens a world of complexity and identity. And with that, let me bring you to the last section of this talk. What if we inspire the lives of these women and more members in the future of the community to create a film series that speaks to the complexity and diversity of the Latinx immigrant identity in the narrative of the United States? What if? What if we told the story of three women who have created an urban anchor in the arts, a poetry club, where they may take up space and share their own narratives through poetry, a space where Latinx women have not been represented in Hollywood? What if we presented a character like Jimena, a passionate human rights advocate, and some may call her too assimilated to American culture? Would her way of living and facing her Latinx identity be wrong? Is there even a wrong way to behave like an immigrant? What if we added a character like Margarita, a woman proud of her Hispanic heritage and a passionate traditionalist? A character many Latinx folks know in real life. How would her passion over her roots affect those around her? Is there a way to appreciate your roots while also appreciate the branches and the leaves that grow within? And lastly, what if we included a character like Lucia, a dreamer thriving in her independence and personal strength and wishing for community as she grapples with identity? My goal is to challenge you as the viewer that Latinx immigrants are not flanking characters of a caricature. Rather, Latinx immigrants are real people with depth, dreams, and ambitions, with lives whose stories share the complexity of the human condition and leave you curious, wanting to learn more about their inner conversations of these experiences. Let us begin to reconstruct our representation on the screen and offer a new perspective to our audiences, one that helps those within the community recognize themselves, and one that presents a more general audience about the complexity of Latinidad in the United States. I shall now leave you with this quote: stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to misalign, but stories can be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. When we realize that there is never a single story about any place, we regain a kind of paradise. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, a feminist Nigerian author whose TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, inspired this study. A big thank you to Adichie, my mentors, my family, and all of the scholars who have supported me to discuss over this issue and talked over the importance of this topic through interdisciplinary studies. And thank you for listening to this oral presentation. Let us begin to reframe the narrative and become the storytellers of our own tales.